Hello, friends. Welcome to We the Weary World. I'm Jackie Lee Howard, and today's guest is Maddux Eckerling. At the time of this interview, he was a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate. And what an inspiring conversation we had. Please keep going. We need you.
So nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you too.
I've heard so much about you. My mom actually was telling me about the school board of directors meeting, about how you stood up and shared. She said there wasn't a dry eye in the space. Why don't we start by just you telling me a little bit about yourself?
My name is Maddux Eckerling. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a queer Jewish senior here in Nevada County. I'll be graduating. Oh my gosh, I'll be graduating next month, and then next year, I will attend San Francisco State University to study sociology and then eventually get my master's in social work, which is really exciting.
That's amazing. It's such a privilege to have you. We emailed back and forth previously, and I'm so looking forward to diving into some topics. Why don't we just go ahead and get started?
Cool. That sounds great.
Have you ever struggled with your mental health throughout your life?
Yeah, that's been a big thing in my life. Starting really sophomore year is when my mental health issues really started for me. I struggle from depression, anxiety, and ADHD. Then in November of 2021, my depression hit an all-time high, and I ended up trying to take my own life. Luckily, I was not successful and ended up spending 10 days in the hospital, 3 days in the emergency room, and then 7 days in a treatment facility with 20 other youth, which was quite an experience. And then when I got out of the hospital, I started my, recovery journey, and it's been 2 years now. So it's wonderful to see how far I've come, and I'm doing much better now. I am stable and things are slowly improving. And now I've shifted from, working with my own mental health, which I'm always working on, but from focusing on that to now focusing on how I can help other people through their journeys, because I had so many struggles during my own.
Thank you so much for sharing. I too spent a week in a mental health facility in 2022. I've had mental health struggles since preteen years, and it's so hard to reach out for help and make the necessary changes. But I too have gone through such a journey of stumbles in the medical professional world. And I like to say that it's like empowered me because I've learned how to advocate for myself, but it's also enraged me in the ways that there are so many people with less privileges than I have and cannot get to that point where they get the help they so desperately need. And that's really why this podcast was created, out of a period of true desperation on my end, and it's just seeing how broken our systems are.
They definitely are broken. I actually just yesterday and today was doing a suicide prevention training for the juniors at my school. And we have 2 junior classes that I went into, and we had a really wonderful conversation. But one of the things that I had to tell them as I was explaining these things to them is I gave them the resources they have, right? And in that list of resources, I have to tell them, hey, if things are at an all-time low and you got to call 911. You got to go to the hospital. And writing that and saying that to them, it hurt me because I knew that might not help someone. It might cause more trauma and more hardship by getting into that system, especially calling 911 if the police show up and make things, worse. And for me, I was physically assaulted while I was in the hospital. I actually was my life was threatened by my roommate and I had to move to another room. And then I went nonverbal for 2 days, and the staff had no clue how to deal with someone who is nonverbal, which was extremely surprising to me because it's a mental health facility. You would think that they would know how to treat someone going through a mental health crisis, but they didn't understand being unable to speak and unable to communicate verbally. And so they gave me a hard time about it. They excluded me from activities. And so it was really isolating and hard to be in the hospital when I was trying to get the help that I needed. And I didn't get the help that I needed until I got out of the hospital. For me, the hospital was just a time to get out of my everyday going to school for so many hours, doing homework. It got me out of that for a week. It got me away from my family for a week. It got me away from all the stress of normal life so that I could kind of reset and then come back and actually deal with the problems and deal with my mental health, because that wasn't happening in the hospital. It was kind of just this place that wasn't my everyday life to reset.
Absolutely. So relatable, Maddux. I think that when I spent the week in a mental health facility, there was nothing that was going to help me on my path besides reset and
Exactly.
have someone feeding me 3 times a day and making sure that I'm taking my medications on time. Other than that, I really don't think that my healing happened until after. But even that gap of being released and getting the help that I needed, I was so unsupported. It was like, okay, you spent a week here and now we're going to release you and you need to go find a therapist or a psychiatrist. And it took me time to get to that point while also still struggling. I'd love to hear from you, like what that experience was after leaving the facility.
My last day there was a bunch of paperwork. They made me create this plan of like, who am I going to call? What am I going to do if, my suicidal thoughts come back? They gave me all this paperwork about how I'm not allowed to own a gun for so many years and, all the medical paperwork that I had to fill out to leave. And then when I did get out, so I was really lucky. My father is a doctor, and so he has many connections, which I'm really privileged to have access to as his son, because we had been trying to get me into a psychiatrist for months at that point. I had told my family that I was struggling with my mental illness, months before, and my dad was trying to find someone, but everyone was booked. No one was taking new patients. And it wasn't until I was in the hospital and my dad made a call to one of his, friends and said, "Hey, my son is in the hospital because he tried to take his own life. Can you see him?" It wasn't until we had that kind of urgency that they were finally able to accept a new patient. And it was almost under like emergency circumstances. And the same thing is with the therapist. Every therapist that we wanted to see were months out. And so I ended up having to see one online because they just had no space for another person. All the resources, they're just overwhelmed. They don't have enough staff. It's just really hard to get in. And for so many of my friends, they're trying to find someone, but they can't. And they're not in the hospital. So they don't have that sense of urgency, even though it is urgent because, every mental health illness is urgent and needs to be treated, but they're not in the hospital. So they don't have that resource of the hospital. And even the resource of the hospital, it's not the resource the hospital gives you. It's the resource of the fact that you were in the hospital, right? The hospital didn't make calls on my behalf. The hospital didn't try and help me. They were just like, "Hey, you need a therapist when you leave." And I was like, "Okay, great, thanks." So it was basically my dad's connections in the medical field that allowed me to find someone. And it wasn't our first choice, but it's what we had to go with. And then I'm also a high school student. So then it's, how is the school going to support me? And that's been a fight. That's still been a fight. I am now moving on to college. So I've been working with the college on getting into their service program. So I had been trying to get a 504, which is a education plan to help those that are struggling from mental and physical disability. And I had been trying to get a 504 for a while. I had spoken with my counselor. I said my needs. I had shown her that, hey, some of my teachers are kind of not officially helping me out here, like, and it's working. Can we please make this official? And I was sort of met with a block. They're like, we can't do anything. We have no proof. You saying you're mentally unstable, that's not proof. We need a doctor to sign something. And so it wasn't until I said, hey, here's a hospital bill that I just, tried to end my own life. Then they were like, oh, maybe there's an issue here. We can now speak. And then when we had those meetings, they weren't taken seriously, and they just give you the same, oh, we can give you extra time on tests and you can use a quiet study space to take your tests. But they don't work with you individually to make sure that each thing you do is really going to help you. One of the biggest issues that I had is I have severe test anxiety. I knew all the information, but the second you set me down and say, hey, you've got an hour to take a test, I'm going to freeze. I'm not going to know what that information is anymore. It just all goes away. Even though I know all the information, I just can't take the test now. And so I failed every single test for months. And the teacher just said, well, you can do test corrections and retake the test. And I was like, that's not helpful. Retaking the test is not going to fix my grade because I'm going to fail the test again. It's another test. And they refused to say, hey, let's find another way. I kept telling them different ideas. I was like, I can write a project, I can write a report, I can do a presentation, I can teach the class for a day. Like, I know all the I gave them all these opportunities to allow me to prove to them that I know the material, because that's the point of a test, right? Is to prove you know the material. And I gave them these other ways, and they just kept saying, no, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. And still to this day, I had to go with tests. I failed out of chemistry. My transcript has incomplete because this teacher was like, you're going to fail. And they were like, well, an incomplete's better than an F. And because you're struggling, we'll give you the incomplete. And so I have an incomplete in chemistry, and I'm not going to take it again because I can't do well in a class that I only can take tests in.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think just hearing the words of your story helped me so much. Even at your age, I didn't have the voice. I just want you to know that you're not only making a difference for yourself, but you're making such a difference for people who don't have a voice and don't have the ability to share those things. I had so many troubles in school and barely graduated, and felt this great embarrassment and shame because I too was struggling with debilitating anxiety. And we'll get into the wisdom that you have through your lived experience. But I just want to commend you, because that is so powerful for me to hear, and I'm sure so many others. The other thing I wanted to say was what you were talking about, getting help right after based on your hospitalization. I think that is also a gift that you receive once you take that step to ask for help. I had been looking for a psychiatrist for months as well, leading up to my hospitalization, and could not find anyone. But once I was hospitalized, I found an incredible psychiatrist and psychologist both, and they've changed my life forever. Like they've completely transformed the trajectory of my life, because I've been able to work through like trauma and complex PTSD and all kinds of things that we all very much live with. Being hospitalized definitely was like a quick pass to finding a psychiatrist, but I did have to do that work myself. Like I did have to hit the ground running once I got out and have a plan.
And it's so sad that the hospital is what gave us that pass, because it's not right that we had to go to the hospital in the first place. And so that'd be the other thing about giving people a voice is I'm the leader of both our GSA and Bring Change to Mind club at school. And so we're able to host different assemblies and programming with the school, which is where the suicide prevention training that I did yesterday and today came through. And the amount of emails and times students have pulled me aside. I actually got an email yesterday after I did the training, and it was just a student saying, hey, I'm not struggling. but that meant so much to me that you brought that in. One of my friends is struggling and I didn't know how to support her. And now I know how I'm going to be a better friend. And to me, it just gives me chills because I'm like, what I'm doing is making a difference and it's helping people. And you don't always see that because as you're standing in front of the class with your presentation behind you, you just see a bunch of blank faces that look bored. But then you get that email and you're just like, oh my gosh, all that work I put into this presentation, it means something to someone. And it's a beautiful experience to be able to see that and to see that what you're doing is making a difference with people that you know, because I know all these students at my school. We have a really small school. There's only 160 students. So I know every single student. So when a student comes up to me and tells me what it meant to them, I know that on a deeper level because I know them so well. And so when I do things, larger for the community and it means something to someone, that's awesome. I'm so glad. But when I do it in my school and I see one of my friends be able to express their gratitude, it gives me chills.
I love that. I feel very similar. Mental health struggles are so prevalent that they are in your friend group, they are in your family, they are in your household, your classrooms. We are surrounded by people who walk with struggles.
Exactly.
And if we can just share little tidbits of our journey in a way that helps someone else, I mean, like that is like my life is complete, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you too are focused on being an advocate for LGBTQ. And do you want to share anything about that journey?
I identify as queer. I started coming out sophomore year of high school. I didn't finish. You never finish coming out. That's one of the biggest things about being queer is every single day you come out to another person. But I finished coming out to my closer friends and family at the beginning of junior year. So now I've been able to start so many conversations and things with I'm a proud queer kid, and this is what I think. And that has been such a beautiful thing for me to be able to do and to give so many people a voice. And the biggest thing that I've been able to do is my senior project, which was an incredible event for over 260 community members who came and listened to me and a panel of 4 other LGBTQ youth. And we spoke about our experiences and what it meant to be in the community. And that panel is still having rippling effects to this day, and it was back in March. People are still talking about it. It's still coming up. It was an incredible event, and it's led to other things that I've been able to do. I spoke at the California State Capitol, which was actually more mental health related, but there's been so many different things I've been able to do. I've been in some Pride videos, and that work to me has been just as important as the mental health work. I like to see that work moving along side by side in terms of my activism. Every time I do a project relating to LGBTQ issues, I do one for mental health issues. I want to keep them moving together. LGBTQ people are at a higher risk for mental health. We're actually at a 40% higher risk of anxiety and depression. So many more queer youth experience suicide. Out of the 20 kids that were in the hospital with me, 18 of them were queer. So when I'm able to bring those two things together and show those statistics and push those things forward together, that's my favorite thing to do. Looking back at my Capitol event speaking, May is the California Moves for Mental and Physical Wellbeing Month. This is the first month of May that they've done it in. They just launched it May 1st, and I was asked to come to the Capitol and speak at their launching ceremony and speak about my experience. I did a call to action asking all of California to start moving because it improves your mental health. And that was a beautiful event. And doing things like that is really important. Doing things like my senior project to explain the lives of LGBTQ youth is really important. I've also had meetings with government and school officials about these issues. I just did a meeting with the Nevada County Suicide Prevention Task Force about how it was basically a plea to them to say, hey, when you're doing suicide prevention, make sure you're including the queer youth because we are at a higher risk. And those things are really important.
Oh, I just met you and I'm so proud. I'm so thankful that people like you exist in the world, Maddux.
Thank you
so much for what you're doing.
Okay, friends, we're going to pause there, but please come back next week for a continuation. I want to thank Maddux Eckerling for this candid conversation and for all of you listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, and you go fight the good fight today because it's worth it, and so are you. Please be gentle with yourselves. We need you.